Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so thrilled that we have these weekly conversations with experts. It is Wednesday, and that means Anna Kelly is back with us. How you doing, Anna?
I'm great, Michael. Great to be here as always.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate you giving us a little bit of time every Wednesday. The conversations are fun and fluid. And today's conversations are influenced by a subscriber question. If you're watching this, just know that you can leave questions in the comments below. Anna and I will look at them and likely make them a topic for a future discussion. So leave questions below. Today, Anna, the questions really are tailored, I'm guessing, from the Dave Ramsey school of thought. So before we jump into the questions, um, do you know Dave Ramsey? Do you follow him? Have you had any experience with him? Let's start there, and we'll go from the questions.
This is a great topic, Michael. So I actually starting out, as you know, I worked in private banking as a financial relationship manager. And
Mhm.
so we dealt with people who had a lot of money and they, had really advanced financial principles, but I didn't have a lot. And so I learned about Dave Ramsey and I actually followed quite a bit of his principles to get out of debt. My husband had six-figure school debt when we started.
Mm.
And we learned to live like no one else today so that we could live like no one else tomorrow. So I followed his principles and we were able to use them to successfully get out of debt. And then I facilitated his Financial Peace University at my church for about 16 weeks. And so I'm
Wow.
very familiar with him and the principles that he espouses to and agree with many of them. And there's some that I disagree with as well.
Yeah. So just full disclosure, I just love how we just throw it out there. I've read Dave Ramsey's book. I love what he does around debt, the whole snowball, and start with the smallest and go from there so you feel like you're making progress. I too had a bunch of debt. I had school loans. I had credit card debt. I was spending everything I made and then some until I was 30. So very helpful. Where I do lose my mind with him is when he starts talking about investment properties, paying cash, getting 15-year mortgage. I mean, he is preventing people from becoming wealthy. Now he protects them up front, so there's all kinds of goodness up front.
Yes.
But
Yes.
once you get the debt paid off or you're in a position where you can invest, his advice on rental properties is so jaded because of his personal experience, right? He had that horrible crash because he had short-term debt in a market that fell over, and he hasn't
Yes.
forgotten that. Um,
Yes.
there's a middle ground, I'm sure, and that part I just lose my mind. So do you obviously know what he talks about with investment properties?
I do, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Michael, when you talk about the fact that he became pretty wealthy through real estate,
Mhm.
and he lost it all,
Mm.
initially through a crash and because of an unwise use of leverage. And
Yeah.
so I think he's very wise to caution people to use leverage very carefully
Yes.
and very thoughtfully. But in the market that we're in today, with significantly lower interest rates than they were when he was investing, leverage becomes a less risky venture when you're using it for cash flowing real estate where you
Mhm.
can make significantly more money on that cash and cover your debt service and where you're locked in for a long time at a low interest rate. So, if we were in a different market and we were back up, where I was when I was following him back in 2006 and 2007, interest rates were 8.75%.
Yeah.
So that was a good loan. That was a personal residential loan. So if you wanted, to invest in cash flowing rental real estate, your rates might be up in the 10% range.
Mhm.
And I will say, and maybe we can spend more time on this later after we answer some questions, but there
Mhm.
is an interest rate point at which using leverage becomes not the best option
Mhm.
versus trying to invest with cash. And I think back in 06, 07, that rate was higher than what that threshold is. But today, where we are today, I would say I disagree with him that you should pay cash
Yeah.
because rates are just too cheap, and we can lock them in long term and really grow wealth by using leverage to our advantage today.
Yeah. So I've only heard one story of because I haven't followed him, right? That whole investing, paying cash just drives me so crazy. I can't listen to him. But the story I heard is he was essentially flipping houses. He took on very short-term debt. It was like
Mhm.
90 days or 6-month debt.
Yeah, hard
It-
money.
yeah, hard money, full payments, full balloons. It worked, it worked, it worked until it didn't.
Mhm.
So first off, he was over leveraging, right? If you follow what
Yes.
you and I talk about, we don't talk about 100% leverage or 90% leverage, right? We're at 70.
Yes.
And second, God, I even today, I wouldn't get a 3-month or 6-month loan. I mean, those are just those are fatal decisions in almost any market. You're guaranteed to go bankrupt eventually running that strategy. I
Yeah, and I think, that's a really good distinction because there's a big difference in doing real estate as a business where we're flipping properties
Mhm.
and you're going in with short-term debt, whether it be a hard money loan or a bridge finance loan that
Mhm.
has a really short repay period. Most of them today are like up to a year. But
Yeah.
if you get stuck with that property more than a year, you can have it taken back. So when people are in the business of flipping and they have a lot of these short-term loans,
Yeah.
that's when you really get a lot of risk, like what he experienced. What
Sure.
we're talking about is buying rental real estate that you hold for the long term. And so you're
Mhm.
putting on debt that you qualify for at once, and you don't have to keep reapplying for these things. You
Exactly.
don't have the risk that the loans are going to be called. And so it's just a very different animal dealing with leverage on a rental property that you're going to hold long term than dealing with short term leverage on flips, which is what I think he's mostly trying to protect people from doing.
Yes, I agree, but he is not communicating that very well.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I have not really followed him in many years. So
Yeah.
I followed him to get out of debt
Yeah.
and to learn to really master my money so that my money didn't master me. And that's the things that I really appreciated about him. But
Yeah.
in terms of advanced financial strategies,
No.
I've really not followed the ultra conservative. I've been conservative, but not
Yeah.
like to the detriment of allowing me to grow,
Yeah.
as you pointed out. So
Yeah.
if I had
So
to wait to pay cash for every rental property, I'd never be where I am today.
yeah, you wouldn't be retired.
Right.
No chance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in the end, just full disclosure, I think Dave Ramsey, for the most part, is helping people. He is someone, if you have any debt, you should follow. Needs versus wants, snowballing debt, lots and lots of good stuff. So the fact that I have a uncomfortable feeling on one topic should not prevent you from listening to him. Go listen to him if you are in debt. He helps you get those initial things started. So props to Dave
Absolutely.
Ramsey. You are helping hundreds of thousands of people. Congratulations, young man. Uh, but now let's get on to the questions, because I thought
Sure.
these were pretty interesting questions. So the first one is how do we, because he actually called you, this individual called you out in the, I think this was an email. He said, "Hey,
Oh,
I want you and Anna to answer this." I'm like, "Cool. I talk to her on
well,
Wednesdays." So it's, how do you think about paying off your primary residence on your journey to financial independence? So there's two questions. The first one is, okay, you have some cash, maybe you're a high income earner or whatnot. Do you split focus, right? Do you buy investment properties and focus on paying off your debt? Where does paying off your primary residence, Anna, when you were starting this journey, fall in the big grand scheme of things?
I wish there was a really quick bullet point answer that I could give you, Michael, but I think it's complex and I think it's
Okay.
important to kind of spend some time on it.
Hmm.
Um, Again, with where we are today with interest rates,
Hmm.
if your mortgage is, sub 5%,
Hmm.
first of all, I'd say if you've got a significant amount, this might be a good time to refinance and try to capture, 3.5%
Sure.
instead. And so, if you have a lot of equity in your home and you have a high interest rate, certainly refinance. Um, with that said, if you don't have a really high interest rate on your home, there's really no point in paying down your mortgage, and it
Hmm.
could slow down your wealth building. And here's why. Many years ago, when we had the old adage of our grandparents that we have to pay down our house,
Hmm.
the main reason for that, Michael, was because in our grandparents' generation, usually the only real asset that they owned of any value was
Hmm.
their home.
Hmm.
And the only real debt that they had was their home, was the mortgage on their house.
True.
So for many, they might have a car payment, but it's paid off in a couple of years.
Yeah.
They viewed, I need to work hard so that when I'm 65, I can retire debt free. And
Mm.
so the thing that they needed to pay off was that house.
Hmm.
And if interest rates were much higher, then of course it was wiser to pay off that house and then have that much more cash flow in their household to be able to live, a fairly comfortable retired life. Things have changed significantly in the world in which we live today.
Mm.
And really, housing is the lowest interest rate option that you have for anything that you can finance. And so if you have a mortgage, 3, 4, 5% interest,
Mhm.
if you have no desire to invest, and you're probably not listening to the show, and all you want to do is have the comfort of knowing that you're debt free and your house isn't going to go anywhere, if it really makes you comfortable to pay off your house and you're not, investing in anything otherwise, sure, go ahead and pay off your house. But
Mhm.
for us as investors and who are looking to grow wealth and to build financial freedom, where we don't have to worry about Social Security going away or
Mhm.
Medicare, going away and not cover us. We're really trying to take the bull by the horns and take control of our own financial lives and say, I want to develop financial freedom. And it sounds like the person that asked this question is asking the same thing.
I think
On
so.
their path there, what do they do? And so, like many others, sometimes the biggest asset that we own is our house, and we
Mhm.
have more equity in that house than we have cash to otherwise invest in real estate.
Mhm.
So if you look at 70 to 75% of the American population, they own less than $5,000 of cash in a savings account,
Wow.
and they have debt of about $70,000 outside of their primary mortgage. And
Oof.
so their equity in their house is really the only asset that they have.
Mhm.
Well, if you suddenly take the little cash that you're growing through your job or through whatever else, and you just put it down on that house, your payment might go down a little bit, but really it's not. It's
Mhm.
just going to keep the same payment, but you're paying it off sooner.
Right.
But you now have no money with which to invest and try to grow your wealth.
Mhm.
And so putting that money down on something that is only costing you 3 to 4% really keeps you from accumulating cash that
Mhm.
you can use to invest in something that's going to make you 10, 20, 30% on your money.
Yeah.
And so rather than paying off your house, I would advocate exactly the opposite. I would say take out the equity that you have in your house,
Mhm.
borrow against it with a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit
Mhm.
at 3 to 4% interest rate,
Mhm.
and then go use that as a down payment on another property
Mhm.
where you can also get a loan on it for 3 to 4%, and
Mhm.
then make yourself a couple $1,000s a month on rental property that
Mhm.
are making you a lot more than the little tiny bit that you're saving in 3.5% interest by paying off that property.
Yeah. I agree with everything you've just said, and I'll kind of answer it this way with what Olivia and I did back at the beginning. We had no interest in paying off our condo when we started this, right? That was already covered in our day jobs, right? It was the number one thing we paid for. We were not going to take any extra dollars and pay off. It wasn't even a consideration, frankly. Right? We started whacking what I call needs versus wants. So we started
Mhm.
whacking wants, increased our cash reserves for the sole purpose of buying the next investment property. We were so laser focused on the next deal. That's
Yeah.
all we were doing. And to your point, at one point, I think it was probably 2004 or 5 ish, we did get a home equity line on our primary to go out and buy 2 or 3 houses. I forget how many we bought, but that was a huge home run because those 2 or 3 houses increased in value and ultimately came 50 to 55 units when we did turn 31 exchanges. So on our
Yeah.
journey, right, when it started and call it 2002, paying off our primary was absolutely not a consideration. So let's flip the script. Let's get to the point where I'm just about to exit in 2018. You exit, I think, in 19. Do I remember that
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
What were you thinking about your primary residence as you're sitting there financially free, right? Income exceeds monthly expenses. Neither of us are empire builders and, flashy cars and all of that. So we live below
Hmm.
our means.
Hmm.
What were you thinking about your primary at that point?
So I was thinking two things, which I think your listener will appreciate. I have seen, strategies where you get a line of credit and you put all of your income in and expenses through that line of credit so that you're slowly basically paying down your mortgage very, very quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
part of me thought maybe that's a smart strategy. But when I measured it out and looked at how little interest I'm really spending
Yeah.
at my interest rate of 3.75%, I
Yeah.
realized that I had a significant opportunity cost loss that I wouldn't be able to buy more property.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that I ended up doing, I pivoted. And right before I retired from my job, I took a home equity loan. So I had
Mm.
$100,000 in my equity in my house that I knew I could use. And I said, I'm going to borrow this at 4%, and I am going to keep it for the first multifamily deal that comes along that I'm really excited about.
Mm.
And literally a month after I retired, I found a 10-unit property that I needed about $70,000 down. And I
Mhm.
used my home equity loan cash to buy a 10-unit property that's now making me several $1,000s a month. So if I had said, I don't want to tap into my equity, it's going to cost me a couple $100s a month, it doesn't matter because I'm making like 6 times that amount
Yeah.
in net cash flow on another 10-unit property. And so that lost opportunity cost is something really powerful. The other things that I think helped me to make that decision, Michael, is that as we've experienced a crash in the past, and
Mhm.
as we know we are at the top of an expansion and eventually a recession will come in the
Mhm.
next couple of years, let's say,
Mhm.
we could very well lose value in
Mhm.
property.
Yep.
If you're planning to stay in your home, it doesn't matter if your house temporarily goes down in value
Exactly.
because it will eventually go back up.
Yep.
So you don't really have to worry that, oh, what if I take a loan and then my house value goes down? As long as you're taking that money only to buy cash flowing real estate
Mhm.
that is bringing you in more cash than what you need to cover that mortgage, you're going to be fine if there's a slight downturn.
Mhm.
But people that don't tap into their equity now, Michael, if their house is worth 500,000 today and it goes down to 3, they have basically lost that $200,000 that they only had on paper.
Mhm.
Had they taken the equity now, they would be able to take, $200,000 and put it down on $1 million worth of property.
Mhm.
And so you have the lost opportunity cost of not touching it, but then you really have the chance of that value disappearing because you didn't utilize it when you had it.
Mhm.
So it's equivalent to basically taking cash and putting it under your mattress. You're putting it under the mattress, and what happens? Over time, inflation eats away at it.
Yeah,
And so it
exactly.
goes down in value because you chose not to use it. And it's the same exact thing with equity that we have in our homes or in our rental properties. Because we are talking low interest rates, and
Yeah.
because we're only talking about using it to buy more cash flowing real estate, we are putting ourselves at a disadvantage by just sitting on the cash in the mattress and letting
Mhm.
it go down in value without putting it to work for us.
So, in short, you did not pay off your house.
Oh no, I max leveraged it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same answer. We didn't prep this ahead of time. So we certainly were in a position where we could have paid off our house. We did pay off our second. So that is closed, or equity line. So we have full access to that, which is something we use and then pay off. But that was important. I did write that check to pay that off when we left. But we have no interest in paying off the 3, and I think ours is 3.65, something like that. Something just
Right,
silly low. We have no interest in paying that off, because
right,
it's fixed for 30 years. I mean, we're going to feel like geniuses in 5 or 6 years when rates are
right.
back at 6 or 7. So we
And you
didn't pay it
also
off.
get a tax deduction of about a third of that. So
Yeah,
really,
it's like
if you've got
nothing.
an interest rate that's, 3.75, you're paying essentially 2.5% because of the
And
tax
and
deduction.
then per your point on inflation, if inflation's at 2, right, you're paying sub 1%. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have no interest in paying that off.
Yeah.
Right,
And
I
the
will.
other thing about inflation that people don't really realize. So
Yeah,
if you have cash in your house, let's just say you've paid it off. So you've got this
yeah,
asset worth a couple $100,000. Inflation, even if the value of your home doesn't look like it's going down, inflation is making the value of your home relative to tomorrow's dollars
hmm,
about 3 to 5% lower than what you think it is.
hmm,
By having leverage, the bank is actually taking the inflation hit and
yeah,
not you.
yeah,
So only 20% of what you have is really being eaten away at inflation. Where if you leverage 8%, the bank's money that they've put down is what's eating away at inflation. And so it's
hmm,
actually a way to hedge inflation to
hmm,
keep leverage on a property. But
yeah,
again, I can't stress enough that I'm not saying take money from your house to go buy a boat and to
yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
life.
Don't buy toys.
Only don't risk equity in your home for things and experiences. Only put risk, by putting a mortgage on your home on things that are going to produce cash flow because they're stable cash flowing investments in a stable area that's recession resilient,
Mhm.
that's going to do well, just like we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, I want to echo that again. I don't want to hear anybody buying BMWs, taking $20,000 once in a lifetime vacations, even buying a second home in a market where you want the second home that's going to be vacant. Those are not things that we are talking about doing. Right? Run the numbers, know your math, and make sure you're buying cash flow assets. Um,
Absolutely.
what do you think about paying off rental properties? Let's pivot that second question in half. Have you paid off? Do you have any free and clear rental property?
I don't. And I know there are people older and wiser than I am that say it's a good idea to start paying some of them down.
Hmm.
However, it's the same exact logic
Hmm.
as we just talked about for your own home. If I can buy property where I'm buying below market, which
Hmm.
is the only thing that I buy. So
Hmm.
I'm buying below market anyway. I'm fixing them up and I'm raising the values. And
Hmm.
ultimately, I have no more than 80% leverage on those properties. Some people would say 80% leverage is too much, but it really depends on your properties, where they're located, and
Hmm.
whether there's hyper supply, what the supply demand dynamics are, what
Yeah.
the area is. When I'm investing only in areas that are really strong economically, that they're growing and they have good school districts, and where they're undersupplied, I know that my real estate is going to do well in good times and in bad times. And I'm not concerned about having the leverage because again, it's locked in at such a low rate that I'm making at least 1,200 to $2,000 a month on a 4-unit building.
Mm.
I know that, even if I didn't make any of that and my rents went down to nothing, I'm still going to be able to cover my mortgage. So I'm not real concerned about it again because we're in such a low interest rate environment.
Yeah.
If rates were up closer to 7%, I would be a little more nervous and I'd
Mm.
start paying some things down. And I don't remember where I read the research, but I was studying an economist who was talking about rates and when it makes sense to use leverage and at what point that break even starts to put you at more risk. And
Mm.
really, it was about 7%.
Mm.
So in my own head, I'm like, if I can borrow 5.5%,
Mhm.
I'm going to leverage up to 80% and I'm going to take that equity to buy more cash flowing investments.
Mhm.
And that has allowed me to just buy more and more and more only because I chose to leverage it up to the full 80% I was allowed to borrow
Mhm.
to then grow my portfolio and my income.
Yeah. This is the one area in my experience that we're off or we're different just a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, because I was very active during the downturn and no banks would lend to me. I took a lot of private money at 10%,
Hmm.
but they were on very small loans. Man, I was buying houses sub 40 grand, right?
Wow.
It's
Wow.
less than lot value, but I bought a
Hmm.
lot of them.
Yeah.
And when we got ready to retire, we actually sold a multifamily property that we thought was overpriced, and we took the proceeds from that, and we paid off a bunch of houses. We did refi also our fourplexes up to the maximum level and paid off other houses. So we created a pile of free and clear single family homes on purpose.
Yeah.
The only thing that's free and clear is single family homes. I call it the worst case scenario portfolio. If the world falls apart, you can't take these.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's some wisdom in that because if banking does freeze up again in terms of what loans they're willing to make, if
mhm,
you do have a free and clear home, they're typically going to be willing to use that as collateral to lend to you again. And
mhm,
so it's not that having a house paid off is necessarily the wrong thing to do. I think a lot of it depends on the phase that you're
mhm.
as an investor, as we've talked about before. Are you in an accumulation phase?
Oh yeah.
Are you in a phase of trying to just produce the max amount of income?
Yep.
Or are you trying to preserve, and be conservative? And depending on where you are, you may make a very different decision. For me, rather than paying something off, I did just sell a couple properties. So
Mhm,
I built some liquidity by selling a couple of properties.
mhm.
And then I will use that cash when the time is right to buy something else that's cash flowing. So there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways to do it. And I hope that your listeners understand there's really no one way or right and wrong way.
Mhm,
It's just you have to ask yourself for every decision I make, what's the opportunity cost
mhm,
of making that decision? If I could put those dollars somewhere else, how much more could I make with those dollars, on what's available to me today? And
mhm,
then, like you did, look at what the risks are.
mhm,
And you have to be realistic to say, what if the bottom falls out?
mhm,
Is having all this stuff 80% leverage going to bite me in the butt? And
mhm.
maybe it will. And if you think it will, take some steps to, free up some cash or to pay down a property or whatever you think is gonna help you to mitigate that risk later.
Yeah. And again, this is just to be clear, I did not consider paying off anything as I was building the foundation for our financial freedom. It was
Right.
never, never, ever, ever a remote idea that crossed my mind. But when we got to the end, we were looking at our portfolio. We were going, okay, how can we reposition things? Oh, by the way, we still have, I don't know, these 17 or 18 loans at 10%. That's stupid, right? Do we go refi them? They're very, very small. What do we do? So we sold an apartment building. We refied our fourplexes. We had a big pile of cash. We threw that at single family homes on purpose. Because again, we kind of got to the end, and for us, it was about, okay, let's create the worst case scenario portfolio where we still keep 30, 40, whatever it is, units free and clear. So,
Yeah, that's
that's why we did it.
and that's an important distinction because you had already built enough cash flow that you didn't have to keep building.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate these questions. Any other kind of Dave Ramsey thoughts and words of wisdom you want to put out there, given you've done some training and research?
Yeah, I think just, I learned also the hard way, that leverage is a powerful tool and a terrible master. And I think I
Oh,
heard
yeah.
that from Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
And, we made the mistake of going into way too much debt to start a business in '07, thinking things were going to be great, hundreds of $1,000s in debt. And it's funny because we actually did Dave Ramsey. We got debt free. We called in to Dave Ramsey's show and said, we're debt free, like he encourages you to do.
Yeah.
And I asked him on that call, okay, Dave, we learned about debt. We paid it all off. We're really excited, but I want to be home with my kids. And so my husband's going to start a business. Do you think it's wrong to borrow money to start a business? And he
Ah.
said, absolutely do not do it. Don't do it. The economy's shaky. It's the worst thing you can do. Don't start the business till you have cash that you can start. And I thought, well, Dave's poo-pooed on our ideas, but we're going to do it anyway because you got to borrow money to make money. So
Yeah.
I learned his principles personally, but I thought that I could make an exception in business, and it really hurt us. We should have listened to him, and we didn't. And so
Ah.
I learned that leverage, again, it's a terrible master. And if we over leverage for things that are not a pretty strong guarantee, we put ourselves at risk. And
Yeah.
so I don't borrow money for, boats and vehicles and trips. Pay cash for those things. If you have experiences and you have things that you want or need, rather than paying off your home, pay for those things in cash so that you're not going into more debt.
Hmm.
So I learned that really the only debt that I'm comfortable with is leverage on cash flowing investment property, because cash flowing investment property is going to pay for that debt. You're buying assets
Yeah.
that are paying for the liability and the debt, and that are going to be, sustaining for a very long time. So just be very careful with leverage,
Mhm.
use it wisely, and in my opinion, only use it to buy cash flowing real estate.
Yeah, I agree. Leverage only for cash flowing real estate. And the other thing that's really subtle that most people don't appreciate is when you go into an LTV at say 70%, right? So you put 30% down, which is your money. Somebody else is not only giving you cash flow that you can use to pay your bills, but somebody else is buying 70% of your asset.
Yes.
I mean, tell me another investment vehicle out there that can produce income for your family and have somebody else buy it. Oh, and oh, by the way, there's tax advantages and all these other things.
Yes.
This is the only thing I will ever approve going into debt for. Pay cash for everything else. Totally agree.
100% agree with you.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Anna. This is, I look forward to these all the time. Guys, again, leave questions below. If you have questions for Anna and I, she checks them out. I check them out, and we'll answer them next week.
Sounds great. Thanks,
All
Michael.
right. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.